Thank you so much for the invite for this. I'm really happy to kick this off with, I'm seeing, let me just see here on this. So actually, I sort of renamed my presentation with a statement. I mean, 5G standalone will, of course, deliver. I mean, it doesn't have a choice, right? I think the interesting question here comes in what will it actually deliver? And I hopefully going to get you at least an idea of what direction we are moving towards. So I think the first question is standalone a good place to be for 5G? As we know, the ones of us who have been involved in some of the, let's say, standardization discussion around architecture, at least at some point, it looked like 5G standalone really was something standalone that did not piggyback much on existing best practices from 4G and the spectrum and quality we have in 4G today. Nevertheless, of course, it is a timing issue, and timing always matters. And if I think there was an interesting survey actually done by Expo and Heavy Reading, where they asked operators in Europe and in North America, what are your vision on standalone? And 88%, or almost 90% of the operators said that within the next 2 years, they will actually deploy 5G standalone. If you just think about it, it may be a bit surprising, particularly where we are in terms of the deployment models we have. But nevertheless, I think it is very interesting because it does show that there is an interest for the benefits that standalone will absolutely give us beyond what we already have today in the radio access network with new radio, et cetera. Nearly half of those mobile network operators were also saying that they actually plan to do that within the next year, next 12, 18 months. So it really is coming. Interesting enough, if you start asking what is it really that we need or they need and what will make 5G successful, you can read the text there. I mean, in general, my sentiment is, well, it seems a little bit the same as what we said before 4G and maybe even before 3G. And while some of this stuff has certainly evolved a lot since the early days of 4G, it pretty much is the same. In order to make the next technology successful, we need all this in place. I think one of the things that I'm absolutely in very strong agreement is that as the networking does become complexer, we do use a lot more software and a lot more independent network functions, in particular starting in the cloud native environment. We do need smarter tools to monitor and actually operate and manage and orchestrate the next network, which we will get with 5G standalone. So all good. So what is going to make this a success? And I would say, wow, haven't we heard all that before? And again, repeating it doesn't make it wrong. And actually, if you keep on repeating it long enough, it may actually become the reality. So what is going to make 5G successful? And in particular, why do we need the 5G standalone with the benefits that we know it will bring? Well, virtual reality and augmented reality, as you can see here, are sort of the top contenders of what executives in our industry believe will basically be driven by the 5G standalone. Mobile gaming, and which is literally something we really get out of the 5G standalone, is network slice-based services, whatever that may be. And I have children and gaming in 3 of these segments, and the fourth one is sort of more the B2B industrial way of looking at the benefits of what you actually would get out of network slicing. So be that, doesn't seem that things has changed a lot. But if you just look at our customers, why don't we ask the customers? And actually, we should also ask ourselves, what we do has to benefit the customer. So that's very clear. So always keep this in mind. One thing is all our own ideas about what our technology will bring the customer, but I think it's always good to also ask our customer what are they looking for, how will that and what we do, how will that benefit them? So keep that always in mind. And of course, we do have shareholders, we do have budgets and investments that needs to be justified. So as we go into the new world of 5G with much more, let's say, standalone, very different architectural concepts than what we have today, it of course also needs to make sense from a money perspective, and not only the uncertainty around the top line, but of course also all of this brings certain changes to our cost structure and our investment plan. So I think it's always good to show the money. Next one, I think you have seen all before, and I'm certainly not going to go through all the bits we will get with 5G. We see some of that already, and also particularly when we go to the standalone. I think there's a couple of things that where we really need standalone. We need it, of course, when it comes to the latency. Here about the less than 1 millisecond. We talk about ultra reliable, low latency communications. And also if you go up here on the 99.999% network availability, data connection reliability, certainly something where standalone really has a mission with the way that we have architected and the flexibilities that 5G standalone gives us. We get, again, part of the ultra reliable. We get up there, we get the QoS flows, which is very essential for data connection reliability and possibly network availability. We can define slices where a slice would have certain properties that increases the network availability. So all, let's say, benefits of 5G standalone. I think some of the other topics, we already have that today with non-standalone. We can certainly get to about 100% coverage in many different ways. We get the speeds depending on how much spectrum we have and committed to 5G. Of course, also on scaling in terms of IoTs, we do know that as we go into standalone, we do get more capabilities to handle massive scale in terms of IoT. And that's all good. I mean, this is part of the benefits we have talked about for now quite a few years in 5G, and the specific benefits that standalone will give us. There is one thing here. I have this little child crying. I think being responsible for our sustainability actions in my company, when it comes to energy, our ambition was that with 5G and even 5G standalone, we would actually reduce the total network energy consumption 50%, and we're obviously not there. In fact, what we probably most of us see is that energy consumption actually goes up with massive MIMO, smart antennas, and also far more computing loads that we need in our network. I should say the standalone, as it looks now, will actually bring some benefits in terms of lifetime battery power consumption of the end user device. And we should never forget that when it comes to the end user device and the scale of devices, of course, that also matters for sustainability and demand. All right, so I think we've seen this all before. Let me just go, because while for many years leading up to actual 5G deployment, we talked about the verticals, the B2B, and all the benefits that it would have for them, and very little about consumer. I do think nowadays it's a lot about consumer. This is just putting, let's say, 4 different use cases up, and a way to look at, if you map the requirements to those use cases, where does a standalone really have a mission? Again, reliability, availability, scale, latency, when it comes to factories. Of course, a generic thing we get with 5G standalone, the QoS flows, that a very different way of handling quality of service compared to what we have today in 4G. Clearly something that gives us more flexibility in providing better services, particular to the vertical segment. Automotive, here's an example of network slicing, where if you just look at the access management function, and within that you do have the mobility, you have the mobility management function. You actually define slice within that. You have a flexibility how to do that, and actually also can differentiate the actual service you provide to a vertical. So basic message here is standalone has a particular mission for these use cases. They will create above and beyond benefits, and I think this is, of course, super exciting for some of these quite high-tech use cases where our technology and our network really can benefit our customer. Timing is important. So this is my kind of forecast. It's based on past diffusion trends. It gives you the mobile subscription by technology, and if you just look at today, there was a recent report coming out last month, actually. About 58% of commercial devices today already support 5G standalone. I should say it comes with a but here, because yes, they do have the support for standalone, but often it needs to be activated. Hence, the end user device needs to possibly updated from a software perspective. The firmware needs to be refreshed. Also, we should not forget that often the network needs to be certified in order to actually activate the standalone. So while there is already a lot of standalone capabilities in the handset base with our customers today, it's always good to keep in mind it comes with this but that there still is quite a lot of work to be done before you can actually activate that. Now, what is the right time to actually really have 5G standalone here? I sort of say, well, I would, at least from my perspective, like to have it around the 50-50 of 5G to the rest of the base of technologies you have. And if you just look at Western Europe, that point is around 24 plus minus 1 year. By the way, you can go and look at other forecasts that probably has a lot more sophistication than what I did here. And you will see that that roughly is the time where you reach the 50% point. You need at least, in my opinion, to have 5G standalone from a core perspective implemented around that point in time. That's also the point in time where you will start refarming or reshuffling your spectrum to support more and more of the 5G traffic. So there is an inflection point here where it becomes much more sensible and where 5G standalone, apart from the new features and architectural changes that it provides, also provides an increased benefit to our 5G base. That's my opinion. What is a trigger point here to start thinking about that? I think obviously as you do get your hands on the C-band, or if you have, which was the case at T-Mobile US with 2.5 gigahertz, a lot of underutilized spectrum, that is a good point to start thinking about 5G standalone from a customer experience on the RAN side, enhanced mobile broadband. That is a point where it does make sense to take standalone. If you just have a very small base and not that much spectrum available for 5G as a standalone case, well, probably it makes better to keep it non-standalone and where the customer also benefits from the quality you already have in LTE. So that's my 5 cents or 50 cents on this topic. Think carefully about it. The cool thing about standalone is from a core network perspective, that is very scalable. You can start small, you can run different instances of 5G standalone depending on what you try to achieve and grow with that. So it's generally a no-brainer to get started on that. I'm certainly not going to get you into the totality of the 5G network. I just thought here that it's always cool to try to put on what is it we really talk about. I think when it comes to the RAN, we are all very, very much aware of it. Obviously, the transition from what we have today, which is sort of non-standalone piggybacking on existing infrastructure, to a more clean version, as you can see here, going from the top towards the bottom. That transformation for at least incumbents or operators that today already operate 4G networks and started with non-standalone is a journey we have to take. If you're a greenfield, things becomes in general, at least on the implementation phase, a lot easier. What is the takeaways here? The new thing is really we embrace cloud. We can do edge in Netherlands. It's a small country. Edge maybe not so super important as it is in a bigger geography. We have to start thinking about what are we going to do in terms of our cloudified environment. Do we do private? Do we do public? When do we do what? Multi-cloud? Do we go to the hyperscalers that may at some point be competitors to us as a telco industry? And also actually not to forget, if you look at the right side of this one here, there is a lot of softwareization of our network functions that needs to be in place. And I think that is an important message here. There is a cloud thing that we need to think about, and there is a lot of network functions that need somehow to be developed and put into that cloud. It needs to work end-to-end to our customer device. That's about it. Let's move on. So just putting all the things that is important for us as we go into standalone. Cloud native, you hear it again and again. And of course, people will tell you that this probably is the best since hot chocolate entered into Europe. We do containerized implementations, service-based architecture, microservice, all these kind of buzzwords we have talked about for many years, and clearly also what we now really want to see being implemented in our network. So leave it at that. Now, I want to get you a journey, because over the last 3 years, I've here in the Netherlands actually had a journey with my IT where we actually took pretty much all our IT functions that resided in monolithic monolithic systems architectures setup, and we moved it basically into the cloud. So we, in 2018, expressed we want to have a cloud-first strategy. And over the last 3 years, we actually are at a point where we now have all our services in the cloud, and we have most of them in public cloud, AWS or Azure. The benefit here we got out of that was scalability and the stability, and of course, all the tooling you get by putting things into the cloud, which is quite substantial and much more standardized than what we're used to in a conventional environment, being it classical IT or being it, let's say, the legacy telco that we have today. So by that, we also leverage very much on industry developments. And of course, there typically we talk about the hyperscalers. We started with a lift and shift and are now in the process of actually transforming that lift and shift to the cloud. This has been very successful. We have achieved synergies here, but I think the most important point is the scalability, its stability, and its tooling and flexibility that it gives us. Also in terms of the development of features and functionality in our, let's say, services platform that resides here. Agile operating model makes perfect sense once you are at the cloud level we are. It gives you faster time to market. It gives you superior stability and quality. You actually react much quicker to changes than what you normally would do if you do the sort of typical waterfall approach. And it actually gives you, at the same time, a better economics. Target sourcing models very much believe as you do this transformation, you need to look at your sourcing. We have done that to a very high degree where we try to align with our partner and also make it outcome driven rather than just time and material, and use function point in terms of costing out what does it cost to develop a certain functionality. Quality focus, it's not a problem to reduce cost in IT or even a network. The problem is that you want to maintain and keep on improving quality for your customer. And there you really need to have a quality first together with the cloud first ambition. You cannot compromise quality. And that journey is something we have been through over the last 3 years. And I think we have been very successful bringing our cloud first and bringing our agile development from something around 5% up to almost 100%. Why do I say that? Well, guys, this is what we are looking at when we talk about going to a 5G standalone. We talk about cloudifying our telco environment in the core. All these capabilities and knowledge and understanding of cloud comes from the IT environment, not theoretically, but really hands-on, having dirt on your hand, you know what you're talking about when you do that transformation. That's the expertise we need as we move into a 5G standalone, where a lot of this will happen as well, possibly, and I think quite likely, at a higher level of complexity than it takes in general to move your IT systems and services and products into the cloud. So I did just for a fun thing. So just to give you a kind of feel for where we went in terms of the ITR spent or IT cloudification from a cost economics perspective. So over this stage, we basically moved about from about 5+% in the beginning when we started this phase, and we are now down at around 3.8%, which is best in class. So that journey, in general, we think that over the next couple of years, we will even go below that. So how does that look for NT? So this is really very close to my experience, my IT cloudification journey, softwareization of a lot of the IT functionality that before resided in either monolithic infrastructure or in a sort of in-house cloud-ish environment. Well, this is very much work in progress. I've spent a lot of time on modeling this and looking at the details of the cost structure of network and looking at where is this relevant. And you see a difference here. The difference is that I have to maintain my legacy for a certain period of time. I cannot just skip my EPC. I cannot skip some of the 4G platforms I have already in my environment, even if they are sort of cloudified, they typically would be what I would call a kind of lift and shift to the cloud, not cloud native. So as I move into this journey of 5G standalone, building 5G up in the cloud and softwareizing my network functions, also a lot of the new network functions that I have, I do expect that I actually will see an increase in CAPEX. I will also see an increase in the OPEX for a certain period of time. That's what I call stage one on the right side here. So this is stage one. So I will maintain what I have and I will start building on top of that. And then after that, as I get more and more phasing out 4G and going into the 5G standalone more and more, I do expect to get my benefits. I do think if you're a greenfield, and there are a couple of examples out there, you should expect the best-in-class greenfield in terms of 5G standalone for the relevant cost we're looking at here, probably to be around 2.8%. I don't see, at least at the moment, incumbents reaching that level anytime soon. They really would need very fundamentally to change their existing architecture. And I think the focus should really be to move to 5G standalone, keep what you have, and as quickly as possible start migrating into the new 5G environment, including also phasing out 4G over such a period of time. But if you saw the forecast, 4G will be with us for a long time, so that's still there. So the foundational here, just like we have in IT, really cloud native. We are not, in general, doing lift and shift here. We really go directly to a cloud native model. There might be telco functions that does make sense to lift and shift into cloud from legacy. Let's do that, and et cetera, et cetera. So I do think that legacy would at least stay with us for another 5 years, which does increase a bit your cost base. Transforming to cloud native, only 4G, 5G, and of course, eventually you probably will have a period where both non-standalone, standalone coexist. Alrighty, so some of the really huge benefits we get with 5G is very much about zero touch. It is with the cloud native, a lot more automation, and also over the last years, also developed autonomy in several parts of our network function. Of course, what we also want is zero defects, or at least reduce the amount of defects to the bare minimum, which is something that if you are into a well-defined and well-controlled, well-managed agile development process, I truly believe you can get to. Or if you have defects, incidents, these should be able to correct very quickly. Zero complaints, of course, what we all would love to have as a CTIO. I like having week where I don't have any complaints, where customers do not complain about technical incidents and technical issues. And of course, as we go into this new framework of service-based architecture, 5G standalone, we want to be in a situation where complaints due to technical issues are reduced due to our zero touch and due to our zero defects capabilities. Just a little bit of the same: network management, network optimization, user experience. All these three elements are giving us the benefits of 5G standalone. Anomaly detection is something I strongly believe is necessary. It's already necessary. You can already do it. You really do not need to wait for 5G there. That's a basic message. Get the experience, really get the hands-on on this, because it can help you in your operation so much compared to not having this implemented. Of course, a lot of things, closed loop in terms of user experience and being able to have a complete view on the user experience, act if the user has incidents. You cannot do that manually, particularly if you have millions of users. That's where you also need to have anomaly detection and all the closed loop possibilities in place in your architecture, being an OSS, but also on layer by layer throughout your telecom stack. That gets you to the zero touch. Finally, in a sort of a conclusion, 5G core will be deployed. It's just it's a time. I don't think necessarily it makes a lot of sense to be first, but certainly the timing needs to be right. I think we'll have a balance between non-standalone, standalone for quite some time. We'll also have 4G for a long time. And again, it depends a bit on your terminal portfolio, and it again depends on spectrum portfolio and economics. Hugely scalable. We expect that to be the case. It's also what we actually see in a proper, well-founded cloud-based IT environment, IT factory. Higher stability, much higher stability. It really leapfrogs customer experience and also reducing pressure and incidents for the technology team that has to manage this. much higher degree of network automation. I'm not saying anything you don't know. This is what we all expect. It is also what we actually see, and actually what we would expect in a cloud-native environment. I do not expect to see a great business case for this. I think it's a natural evolution. If you are a big, maybe a bit overweight incumbent, it will and could force you to rethink your organizational setup. That might lead to organizational efficiencies and a better operations and more stability in operations that would allow you to save above and beyond what a more nimble telco could do. But in general, I don't expect to see great business cases for this, just like there in general are no great business cases for going cloud native if you are already a fairly nimble operation. So for me, standalone is not really a question of if, it's more a question of when. I think it gives us very clear benefits I've talked about throughout this presentation, but timing really always is more important than being first. I don't think customers really care too much if you claim you're the first by having a standalone 5G, unless there are very tangible benefits for them. Probably vertical still would be the one that benefits first if you are innovative and entrepreneurial, how you deal with that. And you can deal with that at fairly small scale. All right, I see I'm being stressed a bit on the timing here, so just a bit of a joke. I just recently saw this article in Mobile Europe where Ericsson claimed to now have latency-free 5G as a reality. It's actually from 2021, the ones who would think that this is back to the early days of 5G. Guys, we will not get latency-free 5G. We will not have zero latency 5G. It does not exist, and it will not exist unless somebody comes with an implementation of wormhole technology. Just like a bit disappointed to see this kind of claim so far into the game, because we shouldn't talk about this because it gives the whole wrong idea about what 5G really is. In the end, thank you so much. I think I am at the end. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Kim. Please note, we didn't say it would happen. We said that Ericsson said it would. Anyway,
I know, but it does. I agree with that. But it's like, okay, but that's not going to happen, right? It's just not possible. But I know.
Okay, we've got a couple of questions for you, please. So first of all, one of our attendees this morning, good morning to you, says it's good to ask about the customer's view of 5G, but what about developers' views? When and where can app or service developers depend on 5G standalone features being available, and exactly how do they access them? On one or on many mobile network operators' networks?
Well, ideally, you would like developers to have one or two platforms like an Apple or an Android, right? And then that will, of course, still remain. The question, I guess, comes in how can a developer start using network functions or functionalities in a way that they couldn't do before, particularly if you want to give an optimal gaming experience within, for example, a particular network slice. How do they do that? Because this is above and beyond a typical iOS or a typical Android. It's a good question. I don't have an answer to it. I still think that the journey towards what I have talked about in terms of a truly cloud native environment with all these wonderful network functions we don't need to have in a classical sense, some of that will be here, but we will not have all of that fully available and fully functional within the next 12 to 18 months. I still think there's a lot of things that needs to be solved, and the whole philosophy indeed of what do you actually allow developers to do in your network and what don't you allow them to do. But I do understand the interest in this because you can truly optimize the experience, and you don't want to develop particular applications for a operator, right? That doesn't make sense.
Okay, Mr. Gilmore, your camera's on. Hello, so can we have one other question, please?
Sure.
And watching the slide, we see, from your slide, we see we're not expecting further evolution to 6G, or whatever we call it, to at least 2030. Is that right?
Maybe I'm getting old-fashioned and conservative and be retired by that time. I have not thought about my 6G in my forecasts. I can be very cynical about it, but I do follow the 6G development with quite a lot of interest, but I also shouldn't we just get started on earning money back on all our efforts on 5G, sorry, before we start deploying 6G. I think there are a lot of interesting discussions around 6G and how that would fit, etc. But my forecast doesn't mean the 6G, 7G, 8G, etc. will not happen. I mean, the industry is always hungry for another G. And my apologies for maybe being a bit cynical on this one. I would like to earn my money back on all the efforts and money we've spent now on 5G and see if this is successful before I, from an implementation point of view, start thinking about 6G.
Kim, that was a great opening session. Thank you so much. We look forward to seeing you in the
Thank you so much.
future.
Yeah.
Thank you
and I think my contact details is available so people can reach out, etc. And then, or you can reach out to you guys. You come back to me. So I will follow the sessions throughout the day. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Kim.
Take care.